Angela Brooks read the numbers 5 times before she finally accepted what she was seeing. Her hands were shaking, her coffee had gone cold, and her heart felt like it might jump right out of her chest. The ticket sitting on her kitchen table was worth $120 million. Not 100, not 1,000, $120 million. At 44 years old, Angela had spent most of her life putting everyone else first. Her husband, her children, her family. For 20 years she had worked hard, paid bills, missed vacations, and pushed her own dreams aside so everyone around her could be comfortable. Now everything was about to change. But what Angela didn't know was that before this day ended, she would discover a secret so painful that the money would become the least shocking thing that happened to her. And when the truth finally came out, someone was going to lose everything. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. For almost a full minute, Angela sat completely still. The small kitchen around her suddenly felt unfamiliar. The refrigerator hummed quietly. The clock above the stove continued ticking. Cars passed outside her window. Everything looked exactly the same as it had looked 10 minutes earlier. Yet nothing was the same anymore. A woman who had worried about grocery prices 3 days ago was now holding a ticket worth more money than she could spend in several lifetimes. She picked up the ticket again and compared it to the winning numbers displayed on her laptop. See, every number matched perfectly. There was no mistake, no misunderstanding, no missing digit. Angela Brooks had just become one of the richest women in the state. She slowly closed the laptop and stared out the window. Her first thought was not about luxury vacations. It was not about expensive cars. It was not about mansions or private jets. Her first thought was about her family. Her husband, Michael Brooks, was at work downtown. He was 47 years old and worked as an operations manager for a large logistics company. They had been married for 20 years. Together, they had raised 2 children. Together, they had survived layoffs, medical bills, mortgage payments, and countless unexpected expenses that seemed to appear every time they finally started getting ahead. Through all of it, Angela believed they were a team. They were not wealthy, but they had built a life together. A real life. A life based on sacrifice, commitment, and trust. At least, that was what Angela believed. She looked at Michael's photo sitting on the kitchen counter and smiled. She imagined walking into his office and placing the lottery ticket on his desk. She imagined the shock on his face. She imagined the two of them laughing together, crying together, celebrating together. The thought filled her with warmth. She wanted to experience that moment in person. Angela called her sister, Rebecca, and asked if she could pick up the children after school. Rebecca immediately agreed. She did not ask many questions. Angela simply explained that she had something important to take care of downtown. 20 minutes later, Angela was dressed and ready to leave. She wore a navy blue blouse and dark slacks. Nothing flashy, nothing special. The lottery ticket remained safely tucked inside a small envelope in her purse. As she drove toward the city, she kept imagining how their lives would change. Their daughter could attend any college she wanted. Their son could start the business he was always talking about. Her aging mother's medical expenses would never again be a concern. Every burden she had carried for years suddenly felt lighter. For the first time in a very long time, Angela felt hopeful about the future. The office building where Michael worked stood 20 stories high, covered almost entirely in reflective glass. Angela had visited only a handful of times over the years. She parked across the street and sat inside her car for a moment. She touched the envelope in her purse and smiled. Then she stepped out and crossed toward the entrance. Inside, the lobby was busy with employees coming and going. The receptionist greeted her warmly. "Can I help you?" "I'm here to see my husband, Michael Brooks." The receptionist smiled. "Of course, he's on the 12th floor." Angela thanked her and headed toward the elevators. Her heart was racing now. Not from fear, from excitement. This was going to be one of the happiest moments of her life. Or so she thought. The elevator doors opened onto the 12th floor. Angela stepped out and began walking toward Michael's office. She knew roughly where it was located from previous visits. As she moved through the hallway, she noticed employees working quietly at their desks. Phones rang, printers hummed, conversations drifted from conference rooms. Everything appeared normal. Then she heard laughter, a woman's laughter. It came from Michael's office. Angela smiled at first. Maybe he was meeting with clients, maybe co-workers, maybe a department manager. She continued walking. The office door was slightly open, just enough for her to see inside. And that was when everything changed. Angela stopped moving. Her feet felt frozen to the floor. Inside the office stood Michael, and standing beside him was a woman Angela had never seen before. The woman looked younger, much younger, maybe early 30s. She stood so close to Michael that their shoulders touched. Angela watched as Michael smiled. It was a smile she recognized immediately, because it was the same smile he used to give her, the same smile he had given her years ago before life became busy and routines replaced romance. The woman laughed again. Then she placed her hand on Michael's chest. Angela's stomach dropped. She waited for him to step away. He didn't. She waited for him to remove her hand. He didn't. Instead, Michael gently covered her hand with his own. And then Angela heard the words that shattered 20 years of trust. "I promise," Michael said softly. "Just a little longer. Then everything will be ours." Angela blinked. "Everything will be ours?" What did that mean? The woman smiled. "You've been saying that for months." "I know," Michael replied. "But we're close now. Very close." Angela could barely breathe. She remained hidden in the hallway, listening, watching, trying to understand what she was seeing. Then the woman spoke again. "What about Angela?" Michael sighed, and for several seconds he said nothing. When he finally answered, his voice was calm, cold, almost detached. "Angela doesn't know anything." Angela felt her pulse pounding in her ears. The lottery ticket suddenly felt heavier inside her purse. A few minutes earlier, she had been preparing to share the happiest news of her life. Now she stood outside her husband's office, hearing him discuss her as if she were a stranger. And somehow, deep inside, Angela sensed that whatever secret Michael was hiding was much bigger than an affair. Because people do not say, "Everything will be ours," over a simple workplace romance. People do not make promises in whispered voices unless there is something worth hiding. Angela slowly backed away from the office. She did not confront them. She did not cry. She did not make a scene. Instead, she turned around and walked back toward the elevators. The envelope containing the lottery ticket remained untouched inside her purse. As the elevator doors closed, Angela looked at her reflection in the polished metal. Just 1 hour earlier, she had believed she knew exactly who her husband was. Now she wasn't sure she knew him at all. And before the day was over, Angela Brooks was about to uncover a truth far more shocking than anything she had heard in that office. Angela drove home without turning on the radio. The silence inside the car felt different now. An hour earlier, it had been peaceful. Now it felt heavy. Every traffic light seemed longer. Every mile felt farther. She kept replaying the conversation she had overheard inside Michael's office. The woman's hand on his chest. Michael's promise. The way he had said Angela doesn't know anything. Those 4 words refused to leave her mind. An affair was devastating enough. 20 years of marriage did not simply recover from a moment like that. But something about the conversation felt incomplete. People involved in affairs usually hid feelings. They hid meetings. They hid messages. They did not talk about everything being there someday. They did not speak as though they were waiting for some larger event to happen. Angela had spent 20 years with Michael. She knew the difference between guilt and planning. What she had heard sounded like planning. When she arrived home, she sat at the kitchen table exactly where she had been sitting that morning. The lottery ticket was still safely inside her purse. For a long time, she simply stared at the envelope. The ticket represented freedom. It represented security. Or it represented possibilities she had never imagined, yet somehow it no longer felt like the biggest thing in her life. Something else had taken its place. Questions. Too many questions. Angela knew herself well enough to understand one thing. She could not make decisions based on emotion. Anger could cloud judgment. Hurt could create mistakes. If Michael was hiding something, she needed facts. Real facts, not assumptions. That evening, Michael arrived home at exactly 6:23. Angela noticed the time because she was paying attention now. She heard the garage door open, heard his footsteps, heard him call her name from the hallway. Everything sounded familiar. Everything sounded normal. Yet she found herself listening differently. "Hey, honey," Michael said. Angela looked up from the kitchen counter and forced a smile. "Hey." Michael kissed her cheek. The same routine, the same husband she had watched with another woman only hours earlier. For a brief second she wondered how many times he had come home carrying secrets while pretending everything was normal. Dinner passed quietly. Their daughter Emily talked about school. Their son Tyler talked about baseball practice. Michael laughed in all the right places. He asked questions. He appeared completely comfortable. Angela watched him carefully. There was no nervousness, no fear, no guilt. That bothered her more than anything. A man caught between 2 lives should have looked uneasy. Michael looked relaxed, almost confident. Late that night, after everyone went to bed, Angela remained awake. She waited until she heard Michael's breathing deepen. Then she quietly reached for his phone on the nightstand. The passcode worked. It was still their wedding anniversary. For a moment that hurt more than she expected. A man willing to betray his marriage had not even bothered changing the password. Angela searched through messages. Most appeared ordinary. Work conversations, family group chats, sports updates. Nothing obvious. Then she noticed something strange. Several message threads contained only a single name and no conversation history. Empty. As if entire conversations had been deleted. There were 7 of them. One name appeared more than the others. Claire. Angela immediately recognized it. The woman from the office. Her stomach tightened. She opened the contact information. No last name, no photo, only a number. But there was something else. Under recent activity, there were dozens of calls, some lasting only minutes, others lasting more than an hour. Many occurred late at night. Some happened while Angela had been asleep beside him. Angela slowly placed the phone back where she found it. She didn't confront him. Not yet. Because now she knew something important. Michael had spent significant effort hiding communication, and people rarely hide only one thing. The next morning, Angela called Rebecca. Not because she wanted sympathy, because she needed advice. Rebecca listened quietly as Angela described what she had seen at the office. For several seconds after Angela finished speaking, neither woman said anything. Finally, Rebecca spoke. "Do you think he's having an affair?" Angela stared out the kitchen window. "Yes." "And?" Angela frowned. "Oh, and what?" "You sound like there's more." "There is." Rebecca waited. Angela explained the conversation she had overheard, the promises, the comments, the feeling that something larger was happening. When she finished, Rebecca sighed. "I think you need a lawyer." "A lawyer?" "Yes. Before I even know what's happening. Especially before you know what's happening." Angela knew her sister was right. By noon, she had scheduled a consultation with a family attorney named Susan Parker. Susan had practiced family law for more than 20 years and had developed a reputation for being thorough. When Angela arrived at her office the following afternoon, she explained everything. The lottery win, the office visit, the woman, the conversation, the deleted messages. Susan listened carefully. When Angela finished, the attorney folded her hands. You haven't told him about the lottery? No? Good. Angela blinked. Good. Susan nodded. Until you understand your situation completely, you need information more than you need confrontation. The words stayed with Angela. Information. That was exactly what she needed. Susan recommended hiring a licensed private investigator. Someone experienced, someone discreet, someone capable of finding answers quickly. 2 days later, Angela met with a private investigator named Daniel Reed. Daniel had spent 15 years working fraud cases before opening his own firm. He listened carefully and took notes. When Angela showed him the photograph she had secretly taken of Michael and the woman through the office window, Daniel studied it closely. Then he nodded. I'll start immediately. How long? Depends on what I'm looking for. What if it's worse than I think? Daniel looked at her calmly. In my experience, people don't hire investigators because things are better than they think. Angela left his office feeling uneasy. For the first time, she wondered whether she truly wanted answers. Answers had consequences. Answers changed lives. Still, she knew she couldn't stop now. 3 days passed, then 5, then 8. Michael continued acting normal. He went to work, came home, watched television, talked about family vacations, asked Emily about school, helped Tyler with homework. The performance never slipped. Not once. By the 9th day, Angela found herself wondering whether she had imagined the significance of what she had heard. Maybe it was just an affair. Maybe there wasn't some larger secret. Maybe she had built something bigger in her mind. Then Daniel called. His voice sounded serious. We need to meet. Angela's pulse quickened immediately. When? Today. 1 hour later, she sat across from him in his office. A thick file rested on the desk between them. Daniel looked at her carefully. Before we start, I need to ask if you're sure you want to know everything. Angela nodded. Yes. Daniel slid the file forward. What I'm about to show you began as an affair investigation. Angela opened the file. The first photograph showed Michael entering a restaurant. The second showed him with Claire. The third showed them holding hands. Angela expected those. What she didn't expect was the next page. Bank records, property documents, business filings, names she didn't recognize, addresses she had never seen. Daniel tapped one document. Your husband owns a property. Angela frowned. No, we own our home. This isn't your home. Angela stared at him. What do you mean? Daniel opened another page. The address belonged to a luxury condominium nearly 40 miles away. The purchase date made her stomach drop. 3 years earlier. 3 years. Michael had secretly owned property for 3 years. That's impossible. Daniel shook his head. No, it's very real. Angela felt her hands grow cold. How? That's not the worst part. Those words settled over the room like a storm cloud. Daniel reached for another folder. I followed Michael for 6 days. Angela braced herself. He doesn't just visit the condominium. Daniel paused. He lives there part-time. Angela stared at him. For several seconds she couldn't speak. Then she finally whispered one question. With her? Daniel slowly nodded, and suddenly Angela realized she still had no idea who her husband really was, because the secret she thought she had uncovered was only the surface, and what Daniel was about to reveal next would change everything she believed about the last 5 years of her marriage. Angela sat frozen in her chair. The investigator's office suddenly felt smaller, hotter. The air felt heavier than it had a few minutes earlier. She looked down at the photographs spread across the desk. There was Michael entering the condominium building. There was Michael carrying grocery bags. There was Michael standing beside Claire in the parking garage. There was Michael unlocking a door with a key. Not visiting, not stopping by, not meeting someone occasionally. Living there, building a second life. For a long moment, Angela simply stared at the images. 20 years of marriage. And somehow a second home had existed for 3 of them, without her knowing. How often? Angela finally asked. Daniel glanced at his notes. 3 to 4 nights a week on average. Angela felt her stomach tighten. 3 to 4 nights. That meant many of the business trips Michael had claimed to take were probably lies. Many of the late meetings, many of the overnight conferences, many of the delayed flights. She thought back over the last several years, and suddenly dozens of moments looked different. Conversations she had accepted without question, excuses she had trusted, stories she had never challenged. One by one they began falling apart. There is more, Daniel said quietly. Angela looked up. Part of her wanted to stop. Part of her wanted to walk out of the office and never hear another word. But she had already come too far. Tell me. Daniel opened another section of the file. What I'm about to show you explains why I don't believe this is only an affair. Angela swallowed. Daniel slid several documents across the desk. At first, they looked like ordinary business papers. Then she noticed Michael's signature. Again, and again, and again. What are these? Business registration documents? Angela frowned. Michael doesn't own a business. Actually, Daniel replied, he owns part of 2. Angela blinked. What? Daniel pointed toward the papers. Both were created approximately 4 years ago. Angela stared at the documents. The first company was listed as a consulting firm. The second appeared to be involved in commercial property management. Michael's name appeared on both. So did another name, Claire Morgan. The woman from the office. Angela's heart dropped. They own businesses together? Daniel nodded. It appears so. For several seconds, Angela couldn't process what she was hearing. This was no longer a secret romance. This was planning. Years of planning, years of financial decisions, years of building something hidden from her. Then Daniel turned another page, and Angela felt the room spin. There was a photograph, a recent photograph. Michael, Claire, and a little girl. The child looked about 5 years old. She had dark curly hair, bright eyes, and she was holding Michael's hand. Angela stared at the image. Her chest tightened. No. Daniel remained silent. No. Her voice cracked this time. No. She already knew. Before Daniel said a single word, some truths arrived before confirmation. The investigator looked down. We believe the child is Claire's daughter. Angela felt tears gathering in her eyes. But that's not all. The room became completely silent. Daniel looked directly at her. Multiple witnesses believe Michael is the child's father. The words hit harder than anything else, harder than the affair, harder than the condominium, harder than the businesses, harder than the lies. A child, another family, a completely separate life. Angela looked away. For the first time since discovering the lottery ticket, she felt tears rolling down her cheeks. Not because she still loved the man Michael had become, but because she suddenly realized the man she thought she had married might never have existed at all. The loving husband, the loyal partner, the dependable father. How much of it had been real? How much had been performance? How much had simply been convenience? Daniel allowed her several minutes before speaking again. There is something else. Angela laughed softly through her tears. The sound surprised even her. Something else. How could there possibly be something else? Still, she nodded. Daniel slid over a final set of documents. Bank records. Lots of them. Pages and pages. Transfers. Deposits. Withdrawals. Account numbers. This took time to uncover, Daniel said. What is it? Money. Angela frowned. What about it? Daniel pointed towards several highlighted transactions. Over the last 5 years, significant amounts of money have been moved. How much? Daniel hesitated. Approximately $480,000. Angela's eyes widened. What? The number barely seemed possible. They were not wealthy. They lived comfortably, but carefully. They budgeted. They planned. They postponed purchases. They delayed vacations. How could nearly $500,000 disappear? Daniel pointed to multiple transactions. Most were small enough to avoid attention. Angela looked closer. $500, $1,200, $2,000, $3,000, over and over, month after month, year after year, small amounts, amounts easy to miss, amounts unlikely to trigger questions. Together they totaled nearly $500,000. Where did it go? Daniel slowly opened another page. Angela stared at it, then stared again. The answer made her feel sick. How much of the money had helped pay for the condominium, the businesses, the second life. The life Michael had built while claiming money was always tight. The life he had financed partly using funds earned during their marriage. Angela closed her eyes. Suddenly she remembered every conversation, every sacrifice, every disappointment. The family vacations they couldn't afford, the home repairs they postponed, the college savings contributions they delayed, the retirement plans they reduced. All while Michael secretly funded another future, another household, another dream. A dream that apparently did not include her. The realization changed something inside Angela. Not anger, not rage, something colder, something clearer. For nearly 2 weeks she had been grieving. Now she was thinking, and thinking was dangerous. Because once the shock began fading, patterns became visible. Michael had not made a mistake. He had made thousands of choices, careful choices, repeated choices, strategic choices. This was not one bad decision. It was a lifestyle built on deception. Daniel leaned forward. There is one final thing you should know. Angela opened her eyes. What? The condominium. What about it? The mortgage was paid off last month. Angela frowned. Paid off? Completely. That made no sense. Michael shouldn't have had enough money. Not based on their finances, not based on their salaries, not based on anything she knew. Then a thought appeared. A disturbing thought. A thought that immediately made her uneasy. What if he was preparing to leave? Daniel didn't answer immediately. His silence said enough. Angela looked at the photographs again. The condominium, the businesses, the child, the hidden money, the conversations, the promises. Everything will be ours. Suddenly those words sounded very different. Not romantic, practical, future-focused, like two people preparing for something, or waiting for something. And then Angela remembered another detail. The exact timing. The condominium paid off last month. The secret businesses growing. The hidden transfers increasing. Everything accelerating. As if Michael believed a major change was approaching. A major change he had never mentioned to his wife. Angela stood slowly. Her tears were gone now. The hurt remained, but something stronger had begun replacing it. Determination. She gathered the documents, the photographs, the evidence, and placed them carefully into her bag. What are you going to do? Daniel asked. Angela stared out the office window. The city moved normally below. People going to work, people buying lunch, people living ordinary lives. A week earlier she had been one of them. Now she was carrying two secrets, $120 million, and proof that her husband had been building a completely different future behind her back. For the first time since winning the lottery, Angela understood something important. Michael believed he was in control. He believed he was planning the future. He believed he was holding all the cards. What he didn't know was that his wife was now worth $120 million. And before he realized what was happening, Angela was about to make a move that would change everything. Angela spent the next 3 days saying very little. At home, nothing changed. At least that was how it appeared. She still made breakfast. She still drove Emily to school when needed. She still reminded Tyler about assignments and baseball practice. She still sat across from Michael at the dinner table. She still smiled when appropriate. She still asked how his day had been. To anyone watching, the Brooks family looked exactly the same. But inside Angela's mind, an entirely different life was taking shape. Every lie she had uncovered sat neatly organized inside a folder locked in a safe deposit box at a bank Michael knew nothing about. The photographs, the financial records, the property documents, the business filings. The evidence existed now in black and white. No explanations could erase it, no apologies could undo it, and no amount of manipulation could make her doubt what she knew. The morning after meeting with Daniel, Angela sat inside Susan Parker's office once again. The attorney carefully reviewed every document. She read each page, made notes, asked questions. Then she leaned back in her chair. For several moments she remained silent. Finally she spoke. "This is much bigger than I expected." Angela nodded. "I know." Susan folded her hands together. "The affair is significant. The second family is significant. The hidden businesses are significant. But the financial activity concerns me most." Angela looked up. "Why?" "Because it suggests long-term planning." Those were the same words Angela had been thinking. Planning. Not mistakes. Not bad judgment. Planning. Susan tapped several highlighted transactions. These transfers weren't random. They were organized. They were consistent. They were intentional. Angela looked down at the paperwork. The attorney was right. The pattern was impossible to ignore. For years, Michael had quietly redirected money while maintaining the appearance of an ordinary household budget. "What does that mean?" Angela asked. Susan answered carefully. "It means he may have been preparing for a future that did not include you." The words were painful, not because Angela hadn't already considered them, because hearing someone else confirm them made them real. The attorney continued. "Right now, your priority should be protection." Angela immediately thought about the lottery ticket. Susan seemed to read her mind.
"You still haven't claimed the winnings?" "No." "Good." Angela frowned. "You keep saying that. Because timing matters." Susan opened a legal pad and began writing. "From this point forward, every decision needs to be deliberate." Angela listened carefully. The attorney explained how public lottery wins often created complications. Friends appeared. Relatives appeared. Strangers appeared. Lawsuits appeared. And in Angela's situation, a husband living a double life could create additional problems. The less Michael knew, the better. At least for now. For the next hour, they discussed strategies, financial protections, documentation, asset records, future legal options. When the meeting finally ended, Angela left feeling something she had not felt in weeks. Prepared. Not healed. Not happy. Prepared. And preparation was power. That evening, Michael arrived home carrying flowers. The gesture caught Angela completely off guard. For a brief moment, she simply stared. Red roses. Her favorite. Michael smiled as he handed them to her. "Saw them on the way home." Angela accepted them. "Thank you." She almost laughed. Not because the flowers were funny, because they were tragic. Somewhere in another part of the city, another woman probably believed Michael was bringing flowers to her too. The thought crossed Angela's mind and disappeared. Michael kissed her forehead, then walked into the kitchen, as if nothing in the world was wrong, as if deception had become second nature. Angela placed the flowers into water, and silently wondered how many lies a person could tell before they forgot what the truth sounded like. The following week brought another surprise, and Daniel called again. His voice sounded urgent. "We need to meet." Angela's stomach tightened. "What happened?" "I found something." 20 minutes later, she sat across from him. The investigator placed a photograph on the desk. Angela immediately recognized the location. The condominium. But this time something was different. The photograph showed movers. Boxes, furniture, vehicles, people carrying belongings inside. Angela frowned. "What am I looking at?" Daniel pointed toward the date stamp. "Yesterday." "So?" "So someone is preparing that property for permanent occupancy." Angela felt her pulse quicken. "What does that mean?" "It means your husband may be accelerating whatever plan he's been working toward." Angela stared at the photograph. The timing bothered her. Everything suddenly seemed to be moving faster. The businesses, the finances, the property, the preparations, as if some invisible deadline was approaching. Then Daniel slid over another document. This one made her blood run cold. A recent email, obtained legally through a source connected to the investigation. Angela read the first sentence, then read it again, then a third time. Her breathing slowed, because suddenly everything made sense. The email was from Claire, and it contained only one sentence that mattered. "Once the divorce is finished, we can finally move forward." Angela stared at the words. Divorce, not separation, not discussion, not possibility. Divorce. The decision had already been made, at least by them. The realization hit hard. Michael wasn't struggling with whether to leave. He wasn't conflicted. He wasn't confused. He was preparing. He simply hadn't informed Angela yet. For years, she had believed she was sharing a future with her husband. Now she understood the truth. Michael had been building another future while quietly waiting for the right moment to walk away. And somehow he expected to leave carrying assets, businesses, property, and a new family. The more Angela thought about it, the clearer everything became. The secret accounts, the hidden investments, the paid-off condominium, the child, the businesses. None of it had happened accidentally. This was an exit strategy, years in the making, a carefully constructed plan. The only thing Michael hadn't planned for was the lottery ticket. $120 million. A variable he could never have predicted. A secret far larger than any secret he was keeping. That night, Angela sat alone in her parked car for nearly an hour before going inside. She thought about everything she had learned, about the years she had invested, the trust she had given, the sacrifices she had made. Then she thought about her children. Emily, Tyler. Neither of them deserved chaos. Neither deserved to become weapons in a battle between adults. Whatever happened next needed to be handled carefully. The goal was not revenge. The goal was protection. Protection of her future. Protection of her children. Protection of what remained of her peace. By the time Angela finally walked through the front door, her mind was made up. The waiting was over. The observing was over. The grieving was over. The next phase was beginning. The following morning, she met Susan Parker one final time before claiming the lottery winnings. Every document had been prepared. Every detail had been reviewed. Every precaution had been considered. The attorney looked across the desk. Are you ready? Angela thought about Michael. The lies, the deception, the second life, the future he had built without her. Then she thought about the lottery ticket resting securely inside her purse. A ticket that had unexpectedly arrived on the exact day her marriage ended. A ticket that represented freedom. A ticket Michael knew nothing about. She nodded slowly. Yes. For the first time in weeks, Angela smiled. Not because she had won $120 million. Because she finally understood something. Michael believed he was quietly preparing his future. What he didn't realize was that his wife had already begun preparing hers. And very soon, their two plans were going to collide. The following 2 weeks were some of the strangest weeks of Angela's life. Everything looked normal. That was the unsettling part. Every morning, Michael left for work. Every evening, he came home. They ate dinner as a family. They discussed schedules, paid bills, talked about school events. From the outside, the Brooks family appeared stable. Happy even. But Angela knew the truth. Their marriage was already over. The paperwork simply had not caught up yet. During those 2 weeks, Susan Parker worked quietly behind the scenes. Financial protections were finalized. Asset records were secured. Documentation was organized. Every account connected to Angela was reviewed. Every legal detail was examined. Susan's goal was simple. When the time came, there would be no confusion, no surprises, no opportunities for manipulation. Everything would be supported by facts. Meanwhile, Michael continued behaving as though nothing had changed. If anything, he seemed more relaxed, more optimistic, more confident. Angela noticed it almost immediately. There was a lightness in him she had not seen in years. At first, she couldn't understand why. Then she realized something. Michael believed his future was coming together. The condominium was ready. The businesses were growing. Claire remained in his life. Whatever plan he had been building appeared to be progressing exactly as intended. What he didn't realize was that the foundation beneath that plan was about to collapse. One Friday afternoon, Daniel called again. His voice carried an urgency Angela had learned to take seriously. We have something important. Angela agreed to meet him immediately. 30 minutes later, she was seated across from him. A thin folder rested on the desk. Daniel looked unusually focused. What is it? Angela asked. Instead of answering immediately, he opened the folder and removed several photographs. Angela looked down. The first image showed Michael entering a restaurant. The second showed Claire arriving. The third showed another man joining them. A man Angela didn't recognize. Expensive suit, silver hair, confident posture. Daniel pointed toward him. That's Richard Lawson, Claire's father, the wealthy developer. Angela nodded. So? Daniel slid another photograph forward. This one had been taken through a restaurant window. Michael appeared to be speaking. Richard Lawson was listening carefully. Then Daniel handed Angela a transcript. A partial transcript. Not complete, but enough. Angela read slowly. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Business discussions, investment opportunities, growth projections. Then she reached one sentence and froze. I expect everything to be finalized within the next few months. Michael had said that. Angela continued reading. The next line came from Richard Lawson. And your wife? Michael's response followed immediately. She won't be a problem. Angela stared at the words, then read them again. She won't be a problem. 20 years of marriage reduced to a problem. 20 years of sacrifice. 20 years of loyalty. 20 years of support. A problem. Daniel remained silent while Angela processed the information. Finally, she placed the transcript down. For the first time since this nightmare began, she felt something she had been avoiding. Anger. Real anger. Not loud anger. Not emotional anger. Controlled anger. The kind that settles deep. The kind that sharpens focus. The kind that removes doubt. Any remaining uncertainty disappeared in that moment. Michael wasn't confused. He wasn't struggling. He wasn't torn between two lives. He had already made his choice, and he had been making that choice for years. The only person who hadn't known was Angela. That night, she returned home with complete clarity. The waiting was over. The investigation was over. The questions were over. The truth had arrived. Michael was sitting at the kitchen island when she walked in. He smiled. Hey, Angela smiled back. Hey. It amazed her how ordinary everything looked. How ordinary evil could look. Not dramatic, not obvious. Just a man drinking coffee, a man checking emails, a man asking about dinner. When if she had not seen the evidence herself, she never would have believed it. The following Monday, Susan called. Everything was ready. The divorce petition, the financial filings, the supporting documentation, the evidence. Every piece was in place. Angela sat quietly after ending the call. The moment had arrived. The moment she had imagined dozens of times. The moment that would officially end 20 years of marriage. Oddly enough, she didn't feel nervous. She felt relieved. Because uncertainty was finally ending. The next morning she woke before sunrise. She made coffee, prepared breakfast, sat at the kitchen table, and waited. A folder rested in front of her. Inside were the divorce papers, along with several photographs, financial records, property documents, evidence, the truth. Outside, the sky slowly brightened. Inside, the house remained quiet. At 7:15, Michael walked downstairs. He looked tired. He loosened his tie, poured coffee, then finally noticed the folder. His smile faded slightly. "What's that?" Angela looked up calmly. "Sit down." Michael frowned. Something in her voice had changed. He could hear it. Slowly, he sat across from her. Neither spoke for several seconds. Then Angela pushed the folder toward him. "What is this?" he asked. "Open it." Michael did. The moment he saw the first page, the color drained from his face. The silence that followed felt endless. Finally, he looked up. "Angela." His voice barely worked. Angela said nothing. Michael flipped through additional pages. The photographs, the property records, the business filings, the evidence. Each page seemed to make him paler. "You hired someone." It wasn't a question. It was Angela nodded. "Yes." Michael closed his eyes briefly, then exhaled. For several moments, neither spoke. Finally, he looked up again. "Angela, I can explain." Angela almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because every person caught in a lie seemed to say the exact same thing. "I can explain." As though years of deception could be fixed by a conversation, as though betrayal simply required clarification. She remained calm. "What part would you like to explain first?" Michael stared at her. "The affair? The second home? The businesses? The hidden money? The child?" Each word landed harder than the last. Michael looked completely stunned, not because he had been caught, because he now understood how much she knew. For the first time since this began, Angela watched confidence leave his face. The man who had spent years controlling information suddenly had none. The man who had built a secret life suddenly had nowhere to hide. "Angela!" His voice cracked. "I never wanted this." Angela looked directly into his eyes. That statement offended her more than all the others, because it was a lie. Of course he had wanted this. Every decision proved it. Every transfer, every meeting, every hidden purchase, every deception. This wasn't an accident. It was a strategy. And strategies require intention. Michael lowered his head. "I made mistakes." Angela shook her head slowly. "No." He looked up. "No. No, Michael. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. A mistake is taking a wrong exit. A mistake is something that happens once." She leaned forward. "What you did took years." The words hung in the air between them. Michael had no response, because there wasn't one. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then Michael asked the question he feared most. "What happens now?" Angela looked at him calmly. She had imagined this moment many times. The moment where all the secrets disappeared. The moment where the truth stood alone. And finally she answered. "Now." She paused, then pushed one final document across the table. A document Michael had never seen before. A document that was about to change everything. His eyes moved across the page, then suddenly stopped. His expression froze. Confusion appeared first, then disbelief, then absolute shock. Slowly he looked up. His mouth opened, but no words came out. Because for the first time, Michael Brooks had just learned about the one secret Angela had been keeping. The $120 million lottery ticket. And in that single moment, he realized that while he had spent years planning his future, he had lost the greatest opportunity of his entire life. Michael sat frozen across the kitchen table. The paper in front of him didn't just show numbers. It showed a different reality. $120 million. His eyes kept moving across the document as if it might change if he read it again. But it didn't change. It stayed the same. Angela watched him carefully, not angry anymore, not confused, just finished with waiting. Michael finally looked up. His voice was low. You're serious?" Angela nodded. "Yes." A long silence followed. For the first time since she had known him, Michael had nothing to say immediately. No explanation, no control, no careful response. Just silence, then his breathing changed, faster, unsteady. "Angela," he said, leaning forward slightly. "We can fix this." She tilted her head slightly. "Fix what exactly?" "This," he gestured at the papers, then at her, then at himself. "Everything. We can fix everything." Angela didn't react, because she had heard that sentence before. From him, from people like him. From men who only realized the value of what they had when it was already gone. Michael continued quickly. "You don't have to do this alone. We can start over." "We can," Angela interrupted him gently. "We?" The word landed heavily. Michael hesitated. Angela leaned back. "There is no we in this situation anymore, Michael." That statement hit harder than anything before it. Michael looked down again at the papers, then back up. His voice softened. "Guess how long?" Angela understood the question. "Since I bought the ticket." Michael blinked. "So while all of this was happening, I already had a future you didn't know about," Angela finished. The room went quiet again. This time the silence felt different, not heavy, final. Michael ran a hand over his face. "This changes everything." Angela nodded. "It does." He looked up quickly. "For both of us." Angela shook her head. "No, for you." Michael froze again, because he understood what she meant. For the first time, he was not in control of the outcome. The next morning, Susan Parker handled the filing. Everything moved quickly after that, too quickly for Michael to keep up. He hired an attorney within hours, a sharp one, aggressive, confident. But even his lawyer understood the reality within the first meeting. The evidence was overwhelming. The financial records were clear. The property ownership was documented. The transfers were traceable, and the lottery winnings were legally protected. There was no argument strong enough to reverse what had already been structured. Michael tried anyway. He argued contribution. He argued marital property rights. He argued timing. He argued fairness. But none of it changed the facts. Angela had secured her position before the claim. Every step had been legally reinforced. Every account had been separated. Every document had been reviewed. By the time the case reached mediation, Michael looked different. Not physically, but something in him had shifted. The confidence he once carried was gone. Now he looked like a man realizing the weight of every decision he had made over several years. Claire did not attend the first mediation session, but her presence was still felt. Through documents, through attorneys, through silence. Richard Lawson did appear once. He spoke very little. He observed more than he participated. And when he finally looked at Michael, there was no anger, only distance. The kind of distance people feel when they realize someone has misjudged their place in a situation. The truth became simple. Michael's plan had always depended on timing, leaving at the right moment, securing the right assets, transitioning smoothly into another life. But he had miscalculated something crucial. Angela was no longer the woman he thought she was. She was no longer dependent, no longer financially vulnerable, no longer waiting. She was already gone, emotionally, mentally, legally. The divorce was finalized months later. It was not dramatic. There were no courtroom outbursts, no public scenes, no emotional collapse, just signatures, documents, and decisions that had already been made long before anyone entered the room. Angela received primary custody. The children remained stable. Their lives were protected. Michael received structured visitation rights. Fair, but limited. The financial division was straightforward. He kept what was legally his, retirement accounts, his car, his portion of marital assets, but nothing more. The lottery winnings remained entirely with Angela. Protected, untouched, final. When it was over, Michael walked out of the courthouse alone. No celebration followed. No new beginning appeared. Only distance. Time passed. Months turned into a year. Angela moved into a new home on the outskirts of Atlanta. Not loud, not extravagant. Be peaceful, real. She paid off her mother's medical debt. She expanded the foundation she had quietly started. She focused on her children, on rebuilding trust, on rebuilding herself. The money helped. But it wasn't what healed her. What healed her was truth, clarity, and distance from a life built on illusions. Michael's life moved differently. He rented an apartment closer to work. Claire eventually left the situation entirely. The connection between them dissolved quietly, without public explanation. Richard Lawson's involvement in Michael's business future ended shortly after the divorce proceedings concluded. Opportunities that once looked promising disappeared, not because of revenge, but because trust, once broken at that level, rarely returns in business or life. Michael continued working. He continued living. But the version of his life he had once imagined never arrived. Not the second family, not the expanded wealth, not the seamless transition. What remained was a quieter existence, one shaped by consequence rather than ambition, one shaped by memory rather than planning. Occasionally, he would drive through parts of the city he used to travel with purpose. Now he just passed through them. One afternoon, he found himself parked near the edge of a neighborhood he had once imagined as part of his future. He sat there for a long time, thinking, not about what he lost, but about when he started losing it. Because deep down, he knew the truth. It didn't begin when Angela found out. It began with the first lie he told without consequences. Angela, meanwhile, sat on her porch one quiet evening, watching her children laugh inside the house. The light was warm. The air was still. There was no tension in her chest anymore. No confusion. No waiting for answers. Only understanding. She had not won because of luck. She had not survived because of chance. She had reached a point where she finally chose herself, and everything that followed came from that decision. The lottery had changed her life, but the truth had changed her identity. And between those two moments, she had rebuilt everything she once thought she had to endure. Not loudly, not dramatically, but completely. And that was the part no one ever sees coming. Because sometimes the real ending is not when everything falls apart. It is when someone finally stops accepting less than they deserve.